Welcome everybody to our regular meetings scheduled for November 28, 2022, with Sueur City Council. At this time, we will call the meeting to order. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Council member, you are all getting your packets this week, had a little time to review it over the weekend, hopefully. This time, I ask for an approval of the agenda for tonight.
So moved.
We have a motion made by Councilmember Sullivan, seconded by Councilmember Schrader. Any discussion, comments, concerns? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. Moving on to the consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda are considered routine and have been made available to the city council at least 2 days in advance of the meeting. These items will be enacted in one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or citizen so requests, which event the item will be removed from the agenda and considered in normal sequence. Mr. Roby, I will ask that you review these with us if you would, please.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, members of council. On this evening's consent agenda, we have 6 items. Item A is the approval of city council minutes from November 14th, 2022. There was a slight change made to these minutes from the original packet. First, the MMPA, and under item 4, the presentation, we just delineated that as Minnesota Municipal Power Agency. Previously, just the acronym was spelled out there. And then there was also we made comment that under item 6, public comment, there were no public comments made. Those are the only 2 changes that were made to the minutes since the packet went out initially. Item B, approval of disbursements through today, November 28th. Included in those disbursements are 3 items over $25,000. The first is our to Kinetic Leasing for our equipment lease payment. It's a 2023 payment. We pay one at the end of each year for the following year. So last year, this time we paid for 2022. The year before we paid for 2021, and so forth. So this payment is due by January 1st. So we make sure we disperse it in time. And that's for $280,607, which is our annual amount for that lease payment. The second is to Truist Governmental Finance, which is debt service for the 2020 bonds, $151,593.74. And the third to L. Swenson Construction for several repairs at the wastewater treatment facility, buildings A, B, C, and D, totaling $41,180. Item C is approval of the payment application number 4 for the CASA 36 electric distribution project. Item D, approve the Mitch Thune Memorial Foundation request for waiver of the fee to use the outdoor rink and warming house for their annual fundraiser. Item E, approve the updated snow plowing policy. And item F, approve 2 proposals from Abdo Financial Services. Take any questions.
Any council member have any questions regarding the consent agenda? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Grogan.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Sullivan. Any other discussion, comments, concerns? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. Moving on to public comment. Public comment provides the opportunity for the public to address the council on items that are not on the agenda. Comments will be limited to 5 minutes per person. Persons wishing to make a comment must sign in advance of the meeting on the sheet provided and identify themselves by providing their name and address. I do believe we have a couple of people that are here to speak tonight. Dan, did you want to speak first?
Yep, you just have one.
Just right. Mr. Ryan, if you want to step up.
Speaking to the ordinance. It would be more
you'd rather speak to the ordinance that we're going to discuss?
That's what I think.
Okay, that sounds fine. Very good.
Thank you.
Other than that, anybody else that would like to address the council? If not, we will move on then. We will move on to the regular agenda. I'm sorry, city administrator update. Mr. Rogan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. A few things I'd like to provide an update on tonight. We discussed this at the EDA meeting earlier this evening. The EDA, as you recall, issued a request for proposal for a housing study to update the city's housing study that was last done in 2014. That RFP was issued about 2 weeks ago now. And in that time, we've received we haven't received any proposals yet. The due date for that comes just after the first of the year. But I have received over a dozen requests for the full RFP from a number of different consulting agencies interested in submitting proposals for that. So I'm looking forward to receiving those proposals and providing a summary to the EDA for consideration in January. The recreation facility master plan. So the city launched a public survey, which I believe I emailed out to all members of council last week. That was launched early last week. It's available online. We also have physical copies at the community center and at City Hall. As of today, we received an update from Bolden Bank. We received 282 responses so far in the first week, which I'm really pleased with so far. Really interesting data so far. At first I was tempted to not get a sneak peek, but then I couldn't resist. Nothing I'm comfortable sharing tonight, just because I want to wait until all the results come in. But a really strong response so far, with very constructive feedback, I would say. Last week, I had a meeting with Henderson City Administrator Lon Burbridge to discuss some changes to the plans of Highway 93. So Highway 93 project, the project to elevate and expand Highway 93 between 169 and the southern edge of Henderson might have some timeline changes occurring, and so he provided an update on that. The city initiated its performance review kickoff. So I don't know if we talked about this in the context of the budget previously, but I just wanted to let you all know. Historically, the past several years, as the city has utilized a performance review process for all employees, that review process is typically kicked off in January with reviews finalized in February. Principally for our union employees, who historically any increases have been based upon a calendar year and or service anniversary, that make more sense to bump that back a little bit. And so we've revamped some of the performance review questions, made it a little bit more, I think, user-friendly, both for staff and for managers, and changed some of the goal-setting requirements as part of that. So just to expand upon the performance reviews themselves, we utilize an online module for conducting performance reviews. And all employees evaluate themselves. The manager will then evaluate the employee. Manager and employee will meet to compare their responses and also set next year's goals for the employee. Once employee and manager have signed off on the scores of the performance review, those then come to HR Director Lawrence and me for final sign off. And the reviews themselves, there are some, what I would say, organizational performance elements such as communication, adaptability, how well an individual works with others, whether they get their work done on time, if there's any truancy issues, things like that. And they score themselves, and the managers score the employees on a scale of 1 through 5, 1 being needs a lot of improvement, 3 being you're meeting the minimum of your job, and 5 being superiors, so you fall somewhere along that scale. In addition to several of these questions around organizational performance, in the past, employees have been given goals. I mentioned we're trying to make those goals a little bit smarter going into 2023, and each employee will be required to have a professional goal and also a personal goal. A professional goal being anything from I want to go get my certification in Emerald Ash for something, or a specific type of application at the wastewater treatment facility, or I want to learn this new skill that will help me in my job. So the manager and employee come together and develop at least one of those goals, and then one personal goal, recognizing individual employees as not only employees, but also human beings who have their own personal goals. And as an employee, we want to encourage the attainment of personal goals. For directors, that would be for Public Services Director Kuchera, Chief Tiki, Director Graff, and HR Communications Director Lawrence. The goals are augmented a little bit, and there will be at least one goal that is tied to City Council goals, or at least has a linkage to the City Council goals, acknowledging that ultimately what we do as staff at the end of the day is tied to what City Council wants to do and wants to accomplish. And so that really gives us a little bit of measurement and also stronger day-to-day buy-in on attaining the goals that we put up here on the wall for City Council. So anyway, that's probably more than you need to know. But I'm really excited. We had some meetings with managers last week to kick off the process, and we'll be starting the union employees performance review process now. And then we will, at least for this year, continue on the same time for our non-union employees, completing those performance reviews in January and February. Finally, Christmas in the Valley kind of kicked off today. The Santa House was brought down to its new location at the corner of Bridge and South Main. The parking lot, city-owned parking lot next to Anderson Skubitz. And looking forward to Friday. It's taken a lot of work, and I would like just to shout out to the Public Works team, which is the broader Public Services team, and the police department, and all the staff who have been involved in doing their part to make sure that the event is safe and as successful as it can be. Any questions for me tonight?
I just have one. What's the evaluation process for your position?
That's a great question. That's a great question. Yes, I failed to mention that because I am evaluated, yes, every year. And actually, I'll maybe let members of the Personnel and Budget Committee speak to this because they met with HR Director Lawrence about this.
It was decided after a lot of discussion. Joe's been in his new position since April, am I mistaken? April, the start of April? The rest of the city staff, I think, will be evaluated, as he said, soon after the new year. His evaluation will come amongst the council closer to that April date. So it'll be after a year. Yeah. That way, Pam, with you being new and some of the other new council members, they get to know and understand Joe a little more. That way we can make a little better assessment, a more fair assessment after it's been a year. So then there's maybe some talk about after that first year that we might coincide his evaluation along with the rest of the city and staff. So did I have all that right, Lou?
Yes, Marvin. Marvin wasn't there.
Well, you weren't there.
I wasn't able to be there.
Yeah.
The other is we talked a little bit about changing some of the way the questions were asked. There were some duplications in the old one. Stacy is working on that. Personnel and Budget will then look at it and bring it back to the council.
Any other questions about that process? Thank you, Joe.
That was a great question. Thank you.
So we all have that to look forward to later in April. The other discussion was it's kind of crunch time here at the end of the year with the budget for next year and a lot of end of the year stuff. So I think it'll work out well and serve us all well to do this in April, getting caught up with the rest of the city the following year. So, great. Anything else, Joe? Very good. Thank you. Moving on. Item 7A, the first reading ordinance 596, amending the composition of the planning commission. So you want to speak to that a little bit, Joe, and make some introductions here?
Sure, I'll just do an overview here and then I can invite
Sure.
feedback from a member of the public who's here. And not just a member of the public, he's chair of the planning commission. So Jeff, overall, the planning commission, the makeup of the planning commission itself is dictated by city code. The planning commission serves a critical role in the function of not only the city council, but the community more broadly. When it comes to anything regarding our zoning code or future development for the city council really should be able to rely upon the planning commission to provide recommendations, to really dig into the weeds on permitted use, unit development, zoning questions, things like that. And historically, that's exactly what the planning commission has done and what the planning commission is charged with doing going forward. Over the past, I would say 12 months for sure, probably extending beyond that or prior to that, the planning commission has had at least one vacancy. It's currently, city code calls for 7-member board. There have been some, I would say, recruitment challenges, some attrition on the commission, some, frankly, attendance concerns with members of the planning commission that have made it very, very difficult for the planning commission to maintain quorum on any regular basis. And the zoning administrator Nielsen and planning consultant Nate Sparks and I broached the topic with the planning commission earlier this summer about possibly reducing the number of planning commission members, acknowledging that a broad base of public input on the commission is ideal, while also recognizing that in order for the commission to get its work done, it needs to have a quorum. And as a 7-member body, it needs to have 4 members to have quorum. With a 5-member body, we would need only 3. Also, historically, a member of city council, this is just past practice, a member of city council has been appointed to the planning commission as a liaison and has not acted as a voting member. City code suggests, however, that member of council may act as a voting member. And the proposal tonight is to conduct the first reading of an ordinance that would acknowledge that a city council member may be appointed by the city council to the planning commission and may be a full voting member. The ordinance also calls for the reduction of the number of members from 7 to 5 and would also effectively reset all the terms of the appointments on the planning commission, such that we would have a more regular cadence of members coming on and coming off, things like that. So at the last planning commission meeting, which I was unable to attend, but zoning administrator Nielsen and the planning commission members who were there were to discuss, there was not quorum at that meeting, but the members who were there were able to have at least a conversation around what an ordinance like this might mean. While I was hesitant at first to entertain this, because the broad base, again, of having 7 members at large from the community providing direct feedback to city council is very important. We're also staring at one of the largest, most complicated developments the city has seen in a long, long time in the new elementary school. And the reality is the planning commission is going to have to act decisively and in a timely fashion to provide recommendations to city council on that project where the city is concerned. And so staff recommendation at this point is to conduct the first reading of this ordinance, again, eliminating 2 of the members, acknowledging that the city council member or members who are appointed to the planning commission are full voting members, and also resetting the terms effective January 1st, 2023.
Thank you, Mr. Roby. Councilmember Crowman, do you have anything to
Yeah,
add?
let me add 2 things. Number 1 is there's not an automatic reset in the ordinance. There's a provision for the new terms. There is, however, in the new ordinance and the old, a provision to be able to remove members of the planning commission. No reason has to be stated, just that the city council do it by 4/5 vote. So if this passes, what we would do, what the council would do, would be to end the term of all current planning commission members and then do reappointments. So that's how you build it in. The other is that the new ordinance does not say anything in it about members of city council. It's silent, but by its silence, it allows that to be done. The old one, I think, had a provision for the city council member. There's going to be a little diciness with that, by the way, if we appoint a city council member, because they tend to be year appointments. And we're talking about, of the 5 people, there's a 1-year, a 2-year, and a 3-year term. But that 4/5 removal provision means if a council member is no longer on council, or someone else is going to take place, you just simply remove one and substitute another. So it's pretty simple, and that's exactly what you want. You want it as clearly simple as possible. Mr. Ryerson, our planning commission chair, is here. Mr. Mayor and city administrator, if you'd like to have them address the council, I think it might be well appropriate.
Mr. Ryerson, at this time, we'd like to invite you up and share whatever information you'd like to share with us.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. Yes, I am currently chair of the planning commission, but I want to emphasize that because it's actually been about 5 months since we had a formal meeting. And this particular topic was discussed only informally at meetings that were not meetings, because there were only a few members there. So therefore, anything that I say here tonight is not to represent the views of the planning commission. And I don't want to put the words in the mouth of any other commission members that aren't here. So anything I say are kind of my own observations. Yeah, I'm a little bit perplexed as to what has happened in this last year. This is my 4th year on the commission. In 2019, the first full year I was there, we had 7 members. And frankly, I do not remember any problem with quorums not being met. There was pretty good and regular participation, even into the first year of COVID. And then when that hit, of course, we went virtual, and even those meetings were fairly well attended. I don't really recall much cancellation, but 2022 has been a problem. Our last full formal meeting with a quorum was June 9th, I believe. This particular question then of the size of the planning commission has been on my mind all year. And initially I was pretty resistant to the idea of shrinking the planning commission for reasons I won't get into. But clearly we do have some present difficulties, not only with attendance, but with recruitment. And so I have, at least for the time being, personally come around to the idea that reducing to 5 is probably going to at least keep things rolling in the future. Although I would say that I would hope to get things back to where there's more enthusiasm for planning commission participation, and maybe in the future the council would see fit to get back up to 7 members. The reason I say that is because I've always felt the planning commission is, as I think Joe mentioned, the eyes and ears of the neighborhoods in the city. And the planning commission's charge under the ordinances and its policies and procedures is an ongoing thing. It's not just working with the zoning code, but we're responsible for the comprehensive plan. And the language that charges the planning commission with that clearly shows that it's an ongoing review and study. And that, I think, as well as the responsibilities we would have under the zoning and other administrative functions, is an ongoing thing where, frankly, and I've said this for quite some time, I would like to see the planning commission having more initiative in these matters. We tend to be simply a review for the initiatives that come from city staff and outside planning consultants, not to demean their work in any way. But I do think that citizens, active citizens on the commission, who hopefully would bring in perspectives from their own neighborhoods and be aware of concerns that maybe other people, staff and planners wouldn't be. And that they could bring those things to the planning commission on their own, vis-a-vis, especially comprehensive plan review functions. I think that this maybe lack of a clear initiative to the planning commission is one of the reasons that there's not a lot of enthusiasm to participate. And that you can actually find, I think, the core reason for that in some of the, at the beginning in the ordinance itself, of the planning commission. And one concern in particular that the new or proposed ordinance doesn't address, and I think should, is the language in the current section 33 of the ordinances only says that the planning commission shall hold a meeting every month. Doesn't say when. And when I started out in this, and I for a long time thought it was assumed and taken for granted that it was the second Thursday of every month. But I don't know where it says that. It only says there shall be a meeting every month. And then it says in the city's website, in other words, where the public might go for notice of the planning commission functioning, it only says on an as needed basis. Unlike, for example, Park and Rec, that says it's going to be the first Tuesday every month. The further section 33 says that the meeting shall be canceled if there is no business to transact. And that obviously means business which originates with city staff having some application or some particular zoning question. If you add those three components together, what it tells me is that the planning commission meetings are all deemed as special meetings. Where would a member of the public wanting to find out about the planning commission would not find that there is a set every second Thursday of every month. It says as needed, and it can be canceled, if the staff says there's nothing to talk about. Now, that's not necessarily a problem, except that the open meeting law requires a 3-day notice for any kind of special meeting. And by definition, I think that's what planning commission meetings are. I know that on a number of occasions, I have not seen posted notice of planning commission meetings 3 days ahead of the meeting. Not that there's ever been an issue or anybody's ever raised a question under the open meeting law, and that's simply something that should be paid careful attention to in the future. I would think personally that it would be better for the ordinance to say there will be regular planning commission meetings every second Thursday or whenever. Those are some of the concerns I have. I think that one of the things that this has, the effect that this has on somebody wanting to be a member of the commission, is you don't know if there's going to be a meeting or not. I'd like to have a kind of commitment where my daily calendar, my monthly calendar, I've got that marked out all year, Thursday, planning commission. But you don't know if there's going to be one or not. And you may get a very short notice where staff says, oh, we don't have any applications, we don't have anything coming up, so no meeting. I think that those meeting days, if they were set in stone like they suggest, planning commission members could find a lot to do. And I think the planning commission members we've also had a kind of an issue of people coming on the commission this year and not really feeling they're getting fully trained and fully briefed on what it's about. And Joe brought in an advisor, 2 months ago to start to remedy that, because we had a couple of new members who were kind of baffled as to what their function was. Unfortunately, we didn't have a quorum. So those are some of the things that my own personal reflections on the planning commission. I think the ordinance to take it down to 5 members is probably at this point necessary. But I think the recruitment outreach somehow has to convince people that they are performing a more valuable function for which they are expected to get themselves well versed, and that they are well versed and trained before they spend one evening in one of those chairs acting as a commissioner. So, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Ryerson. Hey, we appreciate you coming here tonight, and we appreciate the work you do on the commission. So, and also thank you to our commissioner from the city council, Mr. Crowbench, for his work he's done on there also. So with that said, council members, you all have ordinance 596. It was given to you in your packet. You've had a chance to review it. At this time, I'm going to make a motion that we waive the first reading of ordinance 596.
I've got a question before we get a second on that. I'll address this Administrator Roby. Item B on this, we have gendered pronouns on this, and in the Planning Commission about 4 years ago, we struck all gendered pronouns from all the documents. Is there a reason the city code is calling for gendered pronouns? Can't we just go with a neutral pronoun on this?
That's a great question, Councilmember Schluter. To my knowledge, city code in the ordinances that have been passed in recently by the city have not specifically addressed the gender, the ungendering of pronouns within city code itself. So while it's policy, procedure, and bylaws of the Planning Commission may have been modified to remove gendered pronouns, city code by and large continues to reflect gendered pronouns throughout. So if the recommendation is to conduct a first reading with an amendment to that, to the language to change the gendered pronouns, is that what you're proposing?
I'd second it if the mayor would have that in his motion. Yes.
Well, if it's not in the code yet, or it's not in the practice of the city yet to use neutral gender words, I mean, I guess I'm just looking for a little bit of consistency.
Yeah, I would say in response to that it's not, the city by practice doesn't amend city code frequently enough that this would have been a topic of discussion until very recently.
I just hate to see this on the books for another 20 years when we've got a chance to correct this to something a little more neutral right now. That's my point.
I have a question. I don't understand all this sometimes. If it says he or she, you want it to become they, which to me is improper English. That's another story. They is more than one. And that's
They
part of what problem with our
almost
language is right now. We're doing things that don't make sense.
But
And not against people that whatever.
he and she is also exclusion.
We can make it the person, and they'll probably someone will object to that.
He or she or they are all acceptable terms. They is more inclusive.
Point well taken. My motion still stands to waive the first reading as is, 596, ordinance 596. Anything else you want to add?
No, I'll second that motion.
Anybody else? Any other comments, concerns?
Yes. If we want to address this, I think we can address that later.
Okay.
That issue can be addressed, and we need to get this moving now. The other issue that Mr. Ryerson mentioned is having some kind of specific requirement that the council meet monthly. There can always be exceptions to that, but the idea is that they're supposed to meet monthly. That can be built in later too.
Certainly.
But if we get this on the books now, then we can move forward with a 5-member commission, assuming it passes at the next meeting. And then 2023 will be in order so we can do the important things that need to be done. We can't be messing with this. We need to keep that planning commission viable. And I agree with Mr. Ryerson, to kind of rebuild it. That's nobody on that commission's fault. It's just something that's happened. We've got to do better.
Okay,
I've got a couple of the comments also. Chair Ryerson's comments were on point. I agree with all of them. My concern going forward, what would it take to bring it back up to 7 if we had to bring it back up to 7 because they were so busy? Would it just be the same process we're doing now?
Another ordinance.
Okay.
very good. A motion's been made to waive the reading of ordinance 596 and accept changes in that ordinance. Seconded by Councilmember Krogman. Any other discussion, comments, concerns? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. Moving on to item 7B, R 2022-051, initial sale of general obligation bonds, series 2022A-CASA 36 improvement projects. We're going to start with Mr. Sweeney, but before we do, did you want to introduce him with any other information, Joe?
Yes, I'd love to. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is, tonight is, I would say, the capstone of our CASA 36 project work. As a council, to a certain extent, we're going to have to do some disbursements later and start paying some bills, as it turns out. I suspect that's what Mr. Bean will eventually tell us. I'm going to pay some bills. So as part of, for those who were part of the CASA 22 project or who followed it, the process we're following now is very similar, which helps for consistency and familiarity for the broader community. Much like CASA 22, the CASA 36 project was done in partnership with the Sueur County. Improvements, much the same as CASA 22, was not only road surface, but sidewalks, augmentation of existing sidewalks, creation of new sidewalks, streetscaping, water, wastewater, and stormwater system upgrades and improvements. For the total project, the estimated city portion of that cost, so the county does share a portion of the cost of the entire project. The city's portion of the cost right now for the project is estimated at $3.27 million. And to fund the city's payment of its share, City Council had previously authorized the seeking of bank placement for general obligation bonds to take on debt to pay for our share of the project. And I'll let Mr. Sweeney share a little bit more about the process and how we got here. Shannon and David Drown Associates engaged R.W. Baird at the direction of council to seek bank placement for this debt. Bremer Bank came in at the low quote, with fixed 20-year interest rate of 4.75% to fund $3.26 million in principal debt. The debt service itself is planned to come from a variety of sources as planned, partial tax levy, also revenues from water, stormwater, and wastewater, and then some special assessments, which should be familiar to council as we've discussed those a fair amount in the last couple of months. So tonight what we're asking for is actually the approval of awarding the sale to Bremer Bank and extended the for this with Bremer Bank with an anticipated closing of the bond sale on December 8th. And that's specifically the resolution that's in front of council tonight. So Shannon, have you been physically here?
Not in this room.
In council, okay, so some of you may recognize him from the virtual because Shannon was here with the city, working with the city during the CSAH 22 issuance, but that was all virtual, of course. Shannon, as part of David Drown Associates, has worked with the city on several bond issuances and financial consulting over the last several years. And as I mentioned, David Drown has been working with staff and staff consultants over the past. When we started talking about this project about my first month on the job back in February, March of 2021. So Shannon's been involved since that point and has seen it through to here. So I'll open it up to Mr. Sweeney and see if there's anything else he'd like to add.
Oh, just for a new council member and all council members, ultimately, when we're looking to finance a project like this over a long term, our traditional method of sale is to prepare an offering document, secure a credit rating from a credit rating agency. In this instance, it would have been at a cost of somewhere around $15,000. And then use that material to solicit bids from underwriters that are folks that purchase bonds and then resell them to investors. That would be a standard process that we would normally follow. And in this instance, in October, we talked to the council or communicated by letter to the council. I wasn't able to attend that meeting. That ultimately, we're in an environment of relatively rapidly increasing interest rates through most of the year. And a bank proposal offered us the opportunity to fix an interest rate within a week of that council meeting, which we thought, might be a goal. And so ultimately, we chose a little bit different process and solicited bank proposals, including proposals from the local banks. And ultimately, we received 3, with, as Joe mentioned, Bremer Bank submitting the loan proposal. We thought it was important to fix the rate quickly. We've done that. Even reading articles today, it sounds like the Fed's going to take additional action in December to continue to increase interest rates, which trickle down to what we're financing. And so we thought it was good business in order to fix this rate as rapidly as possible, which is what we've done. More than happy to answer questions on the information that Joe presented. He covered it well. The only thing I'd add is there was an error in my letter indicating that the call date or the first opportunity to prepay these bonds, I'd indicated in my letter 2/1/38. It's actually 2/1/28 as indicated in the resolution that's before you. So the resolution is correct. My letter had a typo. More than happy to answer questions regarding the resolution, the Bremer Bank proposal, and the information provided.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Sweeney regarding this bond? I know you put a lot of work into this, sir, and we appreciate your close work with Mr. Roby, our finance director. We enjoyed working with you. We appreciate everything you do.
You have great staff to work with there, so thank you.
Anybody? With that said, then I will entertain a motion then to approve resolution R 2022-051, awarding the sale of $3,260,000 in general obligation bonds series 2022A to Bremer Bank to finance the CSAH 36 improvements project.
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Schlegel. Seconded by Councilmember Williams. Any other comments, discussion, concerns? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Moving on to item 7C, the R 2022-048 and R 2022-049. This would be the deferral of CSAH 36 special assessments. Mr. Roby, you want to give us a little clarification on this, please?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. At its last meeting, City Council considered an amendment to the city's existing special assessment policy. If you recall from 2 weeks ago, The city had used previously, prior to the CASA 22 project, a policy that dated back to the late, I'll say 1880s, 1980s, early 1990s, which dealt with, among other things, the deferral, in cases of deferral of special assessments. The policy that council had adopted in preparation for the CASA 22 project did not deal with the deferral of assessments. And so what council addressed at the November 14th meeting was adding language to the special assessments policy for cases of deferral. And if you recall, specifically, we look at deferral in two lenses. One is the lens of the deferral for a lot that's subdividable. In case that a lot was had the potential to be subdivided in the future, that portion that was subdividable, which has a typically a smaller assessment attached to it, that portion could be deferred up to a point when either the time expires or that lot is subdivided. The second lens is for those assessments deferred for hardship and specifically for age or disability. Tonight, we have two separate resolutions in front of the council. The first, 048, involves two properties that apply for deferral due to hardship. Based on special assessment policy, the entire assessments for each of those properties, $7,500 for one and $8,500 for the other, would be deferred for the terms of the resolution and city policy. The second resolution, 049, would identify three properties that have entered into deferred assessment agreements with the city, where their subdividable assessments would be deferred per the terms of the resolution and city policy. So last meeting, we dealt with the policy itself. Tonight, we're looking at 5 properties, 2 for hardship, 3 for possible subdivision that meet the spirit and language of the adopted policy, and the recommendation from staff is to approve both resolutions.
Thank you. Any questions? I do have a question. Are we gonna, excuse me, we're gonna do these two separate then, correct?
Correct.
All right. I will entertain any motions for the first motion is for the R 2022-048 for the hardship.
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Krogman. Second by Councilmember Schlegel. Any other comments, concerns? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. Next motion is for the approval of resolution R 2022-049. This is for, not the hardship, but this is the zone or subdivision. Thank you. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Schlegel. Any other comments, concerns? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. Moving on to regular agenda item 7D. This would be R 2022-050. Setting of CASA 36 special assessment interest rates. Mr. Romy, I'm going to excuse myself for a few minutes.
Yeah. Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of council, the continuing on with CASA 36 now, and also in the vein of special assessments again. The special assessment policy calls for the setting of interest rates for special assessments associated with the project to be either 3.0% or 1 percentage point above the interest rate at which the bonds are sold by the city to fund the project, whichever is higher. The resolution R 2022-051, which council just passed a few minutes ago, finalizing the sale of the bonds at 4.75%, suggests that the final interest rate for special assessments for the CASA 36 improvement projects should be 5.75%. That's the resolution that's before the council.
Any questions, comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Sullivan.
Second.
Councilmember Williams, thank you. Any other comments, concerns? If not, all those in favor? Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. Moving on to item 7E, this will be the CSA 36 certification of service assessment rules. Mr. Rogan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Lastly, tonight on CSA 36, and I'll certainly invite, I don't want to leave Corey hanging if he wants to share something. I've passed him by this last few agenda items. I apologize, Mr. Beefang. If you'd like to share something, you certainly may. So as part of this project, much like we did with CSA 22, essentially when we're there digging up the road, if we recognize that an individual property has a problematic water line or sewer line or stormwater connection to the main, we provide the opportunity for that property owner to resolve that issue at the time the project is going on. There's benefits to the property owner, right? Everything's torn up anyway. Why not fix it now? We also do offer the opportunity to finance that through an assessment during the same project timeline. So any of the property owners who potentially needed some work done on their private services were offered this opportunity. There were 18 property owners who elected to make these improvements during the project and sign agreements accepting financial responsibility for these. They have the ability to prepay without interest, but tonight's action would take the list that's before the council tonight and prepare them for certification to the county. Finance Director Graff is confirming with the county their absolute drop dead, but for receiving prepayments. But as of right now, we understand that to be the end of the calendar year. If we receive any prepayments of the full assessment, then the amount would not be assessed to the property. Sueur County is a little bit more lax than other counties in that regard. They accept prepayments from us up to the wire. So again, at this time, it's not a resolution, it's a simple motion, a second and a vote on accepting and certifying the assessment roll with a 15-year term at the same interest rate that the broader special assessments were just approved at 5.75%. Is there anything else you'd like to include?
Good job.
Very good. Any other comments, concerns, Mr. Schleter?
Unlike the broader CSA 36 project, I am on the short list for this, so I will be abstaining from voting on this.
Fair enough. And it kind of goes without saying, Mr. Roby, some of the work some of the people elected to have done was, of course, needed work, and some was a little more expensive than others.
It was, yeah.
There's a variety of amounts.
Correct. Yeah, a variety of needs, a variety of amounts, depending on, the length of the private line between the main and where it steps into their home, or if it's water and sewer, or if it's, I'd say every situation was different. Every property was very unique, and especially here in this area, town, even more so than on the 22 project. We're dealing with a much older part of town with some interesting elevation and grade changes throughout the project. So a lot of nuance, as Mr. Beefang, I'm sure would attest to.
The other advantage here, of course, is of having a lot of extensive work done. You have the advantage to finance at a very reasonable rate. So with that said, any other comments, concerns? If not, I'll entertain a motion to accept certify the CSA 36 service assessment roll of those 15 properties at 5.75% interest rate.
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Sullivan.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Williams. Any other discussion, comments? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. We have one that abstained, Mr. Schneerson. Thank you. Moving on to comments, reports, and items of appreciation. Mr. Huntington is not here tonight. We'll move on to Councilmember Krogman.
I do not have anything. Thank you.
Nothing for Councilmember Krogman. Councilmember Schleter.
Couple items, I did have an HRA meeting since our last council meeting, and Administrator Roby had mentioned a meeting with Henderson on the Highway 93 project. I just wanted to comment, since that meeting, I have received an email from Region 9 saying that they would be willing to assist us in grant writing on anything that comes with that project.
Thank you. Councilmember Sullivan.
Nothing to report.
Nothing tonight. Councilmember Williams.
The only thing I'd like to say is I appreciate all the holiday lights by the residents. It's rather festive, so. People are getting in the spirit.
Very good. And as far as my comments for tonight, I'm just looking forward to the weekend with the holiday parade. That'll be Friday night, which begins at what time again? Put you on.
5 o'clock.
5 o'clock,
That's not the
Main
parade.
Street,
The parade is at probably closer to 6.
Yes, festivities begin at 5 o'clock. Parade begins at 6:30.
free treats.
Very good. I hope to be there. I have another commitment that's still hinged yet on a couple other scenarios. So if I can get there, I will, but I hope that there's a good crowd out there. And also thank you to the committee who put all that together, and I'm looking forward to a lot of participation by the community. So with that said, I will entertain a motion for dismissal of this meeting.
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Sullivan, Councilmember Williams. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you.